Um, Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about grants. Kimberly Levon has graciously agreed to come here to talk to you guys about all things grants. So what I'm going to do first is bring up Kimberly. And before I do want to ask you guys, so now you guys can lower your hands. The ones who have your hands raised, you guys can lower your hands because I'm going to ask you a question that we're going to need that again. Okay, cool. So make sure you lower your hand. If you don't, I think I can lower your hand for you. So we're going to just lower, I think a couple of you guys have your hands up still. Okay, so who falls into the category of being US based and you are you have your articles of incorporation and your EIN. So we just want to get a look to see, okay, we have 3 for sure, 4, 5, okay, 6, 7, okay, awesome. And that does not mean that we're not going to answer anyone else's questions. It just gives us an idea of what we're looking at today. And then at the very end, if we have time, we will briefly touch on what that means for you if you're in another country. Because Kimberly is skilled in grant writing and grant finding here in the US, but she might have some ideas for you, or at least where to start, where to look if you are not in the US. So hopefully, even if you're not here, you will have some idea of where you could go next and what you could do. So with that, Kimberly, I'd love to bring you on for you to give us your story of who you are and just how you got, can you give us like a brief overview of how you got to the point of even like finding grants or being interested in them or any of that? We'll take any of it.
Okay, yes, I'm happy to answer all of it. So hi everyone, I'm Kimberly Levon, the creator of Mint Maven grant funding for entrepreneurs in need. And to answer Melinda's question, I started as a fine artist a very long time ago. And as a fine artist, I was directed to apply for grant funding if desperately needed, but to be aware it was super competitive, but I could do all the legwork and fill out a bunch of paperwork and, if I get it, I get it, whatever. And because I was filling out so much stuff as a new student, just felt like it was part of the process. So I just said yes to everything and filled out stuff. Unbeknownst to myself, I had banked over 15 grants and hadn't really realized I had done that many. Just thought, oh yeah, I wanted some stuff here and there. But when I look back, it was a huge amount. So that is how I paid for Melinda's bootcamp. And that is where a conversation started between Melinda and I. And that is where we together discovered my superpower, which is grant writing, funding things, like everything to do with the process. So that is how Mint Maven became to be. And the more we talked about it, the more I realized that I could use my superpower to help others. And that's always been something close to my heart. So I wanted to start with my community of creative entrepreneurs and give everybody that falls into that category first crack at getting some grant funding for yourself to help sustain and grow your businesses.
Awesome, thank you. So Kimberly, if you could give us a brief overview of what is a grant, what are the different types, how can we find them? Give us kind of like the lay of the land and some context first, and then we'll open it up to questions after that. You up for that?
Awesome, perfect, yes.
Yeah, thanks.
So for those of you who are not familiar with what grant funding is, it's free money, completely free. All you have to do is prove your merit, craft a fantastic application, and be matched with the right funder. It sounds simple, just stating the bullet points, but in actuality, it's incredibly difficult to write the perfect proposal and make all of the stars align to get your ask granted. So that's where I come in to kind of demystify the entire process and help you get everything you need to kind of prep for this process, because just the prep alone will take you a long time. So the funding comes from a variety of sources. They can come from individual people who just have a lot of money, who want to help their communities. It can come from banks, any banking institution, because they have different funding at their individual branches in their specific communities, that funding only goes to that particular community. They have fellowships that reach globally. There are hospitals that have funding tracks that all you have to do is go to their website, read what they ask of you, fill out an application, and theoretically get money. There are all kinds of different ways, but the best way to start is community. So think of an apple tree and a bunch of fruit is on the ground. So all fruit on the ground is community funding. So that would mean your physical bank, like your actual branch, wherever you bank at, wherever that bank is in your community, start there and with the banker. Then consider pitch competitions if you're up for doing that sort of thing. They could be online, it could be in your community in person or online. And then moving forward from there to get slightly bigger grants, it'd be a citywide thing. So do a kind of a Google search about your city, look at your city website. They will list grant funding there, and that'll be kind of another easier, quicker way to get funding. It's not going to be huge, but it'll be a good way to get started. And then the next tier would be state funding. So looking at a statewide website wherever you're located in the United States, looking at what they have a tier, a tab on their website they should of grant funding or any kind of proposal funding. And then the very last would be federal funding. So governmental $24 million grants, really big money, lots of work. Those grants normally take 180 hours to complete. The simplest grant application will take you about 8 hours to complete. And that's only after you have 45 plus pages of documents prepared to then be able to apply for the grant. After that, you have to make sure that you fit all the requirements. So some have requirements like you have to have 5 employees, you have to be, the company has to be owned primarily by a woman, and a bunch of other stuff. But each grant has really different and really highly specific requirements. So it's really important if you're going to do this on your own to look at all those requirements and make sure that you're checking all the boxes. If you apply without reading this information and you're not an actually good fit, that could permanently damage your chances of ever being able to work with that funder again. So be sure to do your homework. Also do homework on the funder themselves. They have a mission statement already. They've been in business, they have money. So it's important that their mission statement and your mission statement kind of overlap or dovetail, because they will be more likely to fund an idea that, you know, in an area that they already enjoy. So those are some easy ways to ensure you're not wasting your time, and that if you spend the time to find the grant, to write the grant, apply for it, and manage it afterwards, that you're doing all that work to most likely help you actually win it. Because without all of that taken care of, you could be essentially just wasting your time. So it's important to prepare as much as possible and then dive into all the other stuff, because it's a very long process. Additionally, the funds, if you do get a grant, will most likely not come very soon. So expect a 3 to 6 month timeline after winning a grant to actually get the funds, and then prepare to prove that you have spent every single dime on what you told the funder that you would spend it on. They will do an audit. They will most likely do an audit. They will ask for paperwork. They'll ask for receipts. So that's another part of it. After you're funded, managing that proposal and all the work that goes with it to submit a report to the funder to prove that you did what you said you were going to do. So I know it's a lot, but I'm actively working on a workbook now to kind of make the process super simple. It'll have what is needed, a page for you to kind of write out all of the things that you need or kind of notes. And then when you're done, you'll have a package that you can take to any funder for any reason and say, this is what I'm doing. Here's how much money I need. And here's why I deserve the money for this ask. So that's what I have so far. I don't want to go too much deeper until we figure out if any of that's been helpful. And if anybody has any questions, I'd love to tackle those if anybody has any. It'd be cool if anybody could turn their cameras on, a couple of more people, because it's cool to talk to humans and not names on a screen. sometimes.
Yeah. Kimberly, that is, thank you. I'm going to ask really quick the group, out of everything that Kimberly just threw at you, what's one thing that you learned that you did not know previously? You're like, I never even thought about that. You guys can put it in the chat. You can also raise your hand. I want to see what's one takeaway that you can take from what she just shared, and then we'll open it up to questions. So we want to make sure we have something, and then we'll move forward. 8 hours minimum. Yeah. Also the assumption that grants were only for nonprofits. The idea that we can go to our local banks, that doing it wrong can hurt your future chances. Yes, I had no idea about that. And then the various versions of grants. So all those amazing things to know. We didn't know that businesses could even get grants. Yeah. So there's been an assumption, it seems, for a lot of us, is like, we didn't even know this was possible. We didn't know that the funds might be available to businesses, that we thought that they were only for nonprofits. Exactly. And how much work is involved in the process. Yeah. So even if we knew about it previously, we didn't know it was going to be that much work. So great. Thank you for sharing that, everyone. Okay. So now that we got the brief overview, who here has a question? And remember, we are going to prioritize questions of the people who fit the description of being US based and are a legally recognized business. So with their articles of incorporation. Now, if or in the process of, like, if you haven't filed those yet, it's okay, and have their EIN. So raise your hand. Feel free to raise your hand like we showed you earlier. And you guys can ask Kimberly whatever is on your mind. It's open. She's here. Ask questions. All right. We will start with Maria.
Glad I didn't forget to unmute. Hello. Hi, Kimberly. Thank you so much for this talk. I actually was aware about grants for artists, but I had no idea that, that a business could do it. I know about like SBA loans and all of these things, of course, but not specifically grants. Do some of these grants for artists overlap with the creative community? Like if you're not necessarily, if you're a designer per se or whatnot, or are there specific grants that are more like on the arts, the fine arts, and then other grants specifically just for like more business oriented approach?
There are all kinds. So there are fine art specific grants, even so specific. I found one yesterday for a jewelry artist, just one, but you had to be a jewelry silver metalsmith to get this grant. So hyper specific, and then hyper broad. So just grants for women, just for women-owned businesses, just for businesses, but most of them are going to tackle people of color, women, LGBTQ, fine artists, creatives. But in terms of designers, that there's not specifically grants for that per se. If you are a digital artist, that might be a thing within the creative side, but you could tackle that need. Like say you needed a Wacom tablet or something, or a new computer, and you identify as a creative, you could just look for a business specific grant rather than a creative business specific to still get the funding. So I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Thank you. Fernando.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hey, I'm curious about the women-owned business directed grants. My business is actually owned by my wife, so that's what I'm asking. So
awesome.
Yeah, so I know that there's a client that I've been working with that does use the set-asides. He has been certified on set-asides by the SBA. Have you heard about those?
No, I have not.
So maybe that would actually help Maria too, because, and I'm not trying to step on your toes here. I think there's an actual question to this. But what it is like the government sets aside a portion of federal contracts to be assigned to small business owners or to women-owned businesses, or actually to economically disadvantaged women owned businesses. So there's a bunch of those, and they have to assign part of the federal contracts to those businesses. It's not a grant. It has not necessarily the same process, but I was wondering if you've seen anything like that that pertains to like grants.
There are women-specific grants that are only for women founders, or the business is owned by 51% female-led type of thing. But what you referenced, I've not heard of yet. I feel like that's also a really niche thing, but I would love to talk to you more about it if you're willing to have a conversation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So what was your question about women?
Essentially, like, how do they work? Where do you find them?
So
what are specifically the requirements or anything?
Okay, so the requirements are mostly, generally it's 51% women owned. If the business is that percentage, then you would qualify for a women only based grant. That grant versus every other grant would require the same things, which would be articles of incorporation, an EIN number, a profit and loss statement, a business plan, and a long list of other things, which I will have in a document for everyone very soon. But it's a lot of kind of prep work, a lot of federal paperwork too, like an SBAM number, I'm sorry, a Bradbury and Dunn's number, which is a different thing, right? That's when you get into the federal, but I feel like if for any grant, even if you were starting with a community sized grant or a $25 million grant, the requirements for both are the same thing. So preparing this information would just benefit you permanently moving forward. You'll never have to do this again. It'll apply to every other grant, and unless you change a phone number, you should be set. You should never have to do this stuff ever again. It's just finding them and applying.
Yeah, and this is not only for art. This is for a business.
Yes. So grants can literally cover anything. Think if you need dentures, you can get a grant for that. If you need childcare, if you want to travel, if you want to take Melinda's boot camp, like I did, I got the grant to cover the entire boot camp. I wrote the grant just for her and I won. So just think of anything that your business needs that you need to purchase and you don't have the funds for. Think, I could find a grant to cover this cost. Like, think of it that way, and it'll be easier to, to accomplish your goal that way.
Okay.
And I'll be giving a list for your part about where to find them. I'll be sharing a list of grant databases for different specialties. So everyone has a couple 100,000 grants to look at, and you can just see, because currently there's $68 billion open in grant funding globally. So there's plenty of money. Everyone can have some. It's just a matter of preparing your ask in the best way for you to receive those funds.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you for going to know.
I ran into a new question. The Edwards and Brandon or whatever name they need for the federal government.
What about federal government?
Remember
Bradbury Dunn's number?
Yes, that.
So
was it super hard to get?
Yes, so it's highly difficult. It's a long process. It takes months to complete. It's a federal number. What it entails, I'm not sure yet. I've only started that journey myself, but I can tell you that others who have applied for it, it's taken 6 months to a year. Why? I'm not sure. It's just a federal number, similar to your EIN, which is like your business's social security number. If it was a person, the Bradbury Dunn's number is similar to that, and the federal government has to approve it before you can get it. But when you get it, you can apply to these $24 million sized grants at the federal level at grants.gov. That would be the first place. If anyone's ready to apply to a grant of that size or do that work, go to grants.gov. And I will be providing other databases. I just can't remember them off the top of my head right now.
Does it cost money to get that number?
It does not. Most of these grant applications should not cost you anything to apply either. There's some do have small like application fees, like $15 or something like that, but most do not. It's just a matter of doing the work, being patient, and then not losing the paperwork, because they will not replace that paperwork. You'll have to reapply, and you may not be able to get a new number for some reason. And why you can't, I'm not sure, but they're just not, they don't allow it. So you could theoretically be, if you lose that number, be completely unable to apply for a grant at any time in the future because you're unable to get a new number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sucks.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Right. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, good.
And-
Thanks so much.
I just want to, before we go to the next question, I know I do see you guys in the chat. I do see your questions. So you're welcome to put them there. I might call you up later to have you ask that question, but just know that our plan is for us to cover those questions too. Ideally, and you will be called on first, you'll get your questions answered first if you do raise your hand. So those questions in the chat are amazing, and I do want to get to them. So I just wanted to call that out, but let's move on to who does have their hand up. Integrated Media Productions. What is introduce yourself? What's your name? And then.
Oh, hey, sorry. Yeah, my name is Brett.
Brett. Hey, Brett. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Melinda.
What's your question?
Yeah. So I have worked on staff on nonprofits, have helped them go through acquiring DUNS numbers and that sort of thing. I'm surprised actually to hear you say that it has taken you so long, Kimberly. I know most of the time, and maybe it's different for nonprofits, but we were able to acquire DUNS numbers within a month or two, usually, to get through the application process. That being said, I've also worked under grants. I have taught for colleges as they have applied for special teaching grants to give free schooling to people in my niche, in my field, but I've never applied for a grant through my company. So my question for you, Kimberly, is it possible for me to get grants to essentially bring people on as interns to cover our cost, to bring people on as interns and train them in this field, give them the practical skills, and kind of cover our cost of, making that happen for a certain amount of time?
Yes.
Awesome. That was easy.
Yeah, it's so grants can help anyone. You can get individual grants for non-businesses if you had a tax need, a medical need, food, rent, whatever. There are different grants for individual people for those needs. For brand new businesses, startup costs, grants can cover the startup costs. They can cover interns. They can cover complete people, like a contract with your CPA for 3 years. Virtually anything you can think of, a grant can cover. It's just a matter of finding it in time, being prepared, and then having the merit, because the competition is completely, as you know, is insanely fierce. So it's like, why fund your business who needs interns versus Fernando's who needs interns? And you both submit an awesome application and you both have the merit and everything's great, but I only have 5 grants to give out and 25
Right.
people, right? So knowing that as well, like you could do everything right, you could be the best, but you could still not get funded, not for any reason of your own. And that sucks. But the option is there, the money is there, and you can absolutely get virtually everything you need done, everything you need funded, done through a grant.
Excellent. Okay. My follow-up question then to that, Kimberly, is, are grants taxable?
Some grants are and some are not. If they are, they will let you know. So for example, if anyone received COVID flagged funding, that was not taxable. If it's coming from an individual establishment or a funder or somebody who only exclusively gives out grants as a job, full-time job, they will most likely collect, or you'll need to pay taxes on that. But you when you get a grant, you will get an approval letter. It will outline how you can spend the funds, how quickly you need to, who you need to contact afterwards, what you need to save to show the funder that you've done what you've said. And in that, it will tell you if you do need to pay taxes. So every funder is different. So make sure that anything that they write, just make sure you actually read it and understand it. So you're not asking redundant questions, that because one of the biggest complaints from funders is that they've done all this work, they've sourced all this information, they've built this program, they're giving out this money, they put it on their website, they put an application out, and then you call them and say, well, how do I get free money and how do you do this? And they're like, it only took us, I don't know, 6 to 8 months of working with a brand strategist and a copywriter and all these people. I'm sorry, do you want me to hold your hand too? Like, don't be mean to them. Like, make it easy for them. Do your homework, prepare, and go in, you know, like treat it like a date, right? Like you want to work with them, you want them to give you money. Why would they do that? You're nice, you're prepared, you did your homework on them, you took interest. You know what I mean? Like, it's simple that way. But that's the stuff that people that don't do that are going to be easily not funded. It's an easy no to say to people like that, right? So if you know all this stuff and you can start applying it and like making it part of your daily life, that'll also help you as another tiny little thing to overcome this sea of competition.
Excellent. Other than that, Kimberly, I think my only other question is going to be, how can we start utilizing you to make this happen?
I'll take a note and I'll contact you in a bit. But for anybody else who's interested, you can visit me on my website, mintmaven.co.
Okay.
I am updating my email and some other things, so please don't, please just go there to check out the frequently asked questions, my rate and stuff like that. And then for anybody who's really wanting to work with me immediately, please DM me now.
I'll get the link too.
Oh, cool. Very good.
Yeah. So I'll put it in the chat. Kimberly, do you want Mint Maven or Kimberly Levon for Instagram?
Oh, Mint Maven for Instagram.
Okay, I'll share those links in the chat. Brett, do you have any other questions? Those were really great.
Not at the moment. I really appreciate it though.
My pleasure.
Awesome. We'll go to Maria. Did you have a question? And then I'm going to bring up some of the questions in the chat after Maria asks hers.
No, just through the conversation, I got curious, Kimberly, since you're so aware of all these grants and like what they can do, have you ever applied to the same funder more than once? Like, for example, knowing, for example, that you were able to fund the bootcamp through this one particular grant. Like, once you use them, are you not going back to them, or now you know, okay, their interest is to, let's say, help women with their business goals? I don't know. And would you ever like go back to the same funder, and would they fund you again?
Yes, I have worked with one funder who's funded me multiple times personally. I have garnered, I want to say, over 10,000 from one funder in the past. And you are encouraged to develop that relationship with them. So being funded multiple times from one person is not out of the question. It's actually, for some people, it's preferred, because some organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they have so much money, they're required to give it to charity, like in a huge amount. So if they know that Maria's business needs funds as a nonprofit and is working from now 10, 20 years, that just makes their lives easier, because they already know you, they know the money's going somewhere positive, and they want to help you. So that's not out of the question at all. But I would suggest, after a certain amount of times, like say they funded you, 3 or 4 or 5 times, I would just keep in mind, how much more you even feel comfortable asking them, because you don't want to wear out your welcome either. And to keep in mind, there's $68 billion globally. So go, do that work and go look for other people, but definitely build that relationship. And then maybe that would parlay into something for somebody else. So maybe your intern or a little sister or cousin or something is inspired by you and wants to follow your footsteps. You could submit them to your funder, and then they could get the funding and so on, because most of these places really want to help people succeed. And the whole point of giving these grants out is to watch your business grow and succeed. Like their only want is to actually help you, like transparently. So it's your job to make sure that you do that, like take the money and do what you said. And I'm doing it because in my application for Melinda's bootcamp, I said, she's going to change my life. This is going to be my big break. I'm going to change the world with this. And I didn't know that. I was super helpful, like hopeful, because I was so happy about it. But then ta-da, here we are, right? So that's what they want to see. They want to see collaboration. They want to see you working with people. They want to see you grow and prosper. And they know that you can't without this. And they also know that you're facing obstacles, and that's why you need the grant in the first place. So be transparent about that when you're writing your grant. Like if you survived a catastrophic fire and, or war-torn country or something, tell them that. Tell them, like, I overcame all of these awful things, and I'm still here, and I'm still working, and I'm doing a good job, but I just need a little bit of help, and this grant will do that. And if you give it to me, I will be able to do all this awesome stuff. Paint the picture. As a creative person, any creative should be able to do that in their own way. But just, if you can't do it with words, do it how you do it, and then work with a copywriter, grant writer, not a copywriter, specifically a grant writer, to refine the edges and then submit it for you. But yeah, I hope that helps.
Great. Thank you, both Maria and Kimberly. I'm going to jump to some questions that I see in the chat. And in the meantime, if a question pops into your head that you want to ask, you can raise your hand and I will come to you after we address these. So the first one was from Frank. He said, I feel like there are so many nuances to grant writing. Are there any good resources to keep track of new opportunities, like an aggregator? And you had mentioned some databases, Kimberly. Could you just talk really quick about that? Databases, or where to find a group of new opportunities?
Yes. So if you don't want to do the Sherlock Holmes route that I've taken, which is just following breadcrumbs and piecing together my own secret grant finding strategy, you can go to any number of grant databases. So the first one, the most easy one to remember and to start with, is grants.gov. That is a federal grant funding guide. All the federal grants are there. You can search by what you do, by women, by category, by grant funding amount. That's an option for creative people specifically. There's a different, what is it? The NEA. I'm so sorry. There's so many of them. I can't keep them track in my head, but there are several directories specifically for fine artists. There's a directory specifically for women, and that's women virtually globally anywhere. I do believe that's grantsforwomen.net or .org. I forget, but I will provide all these later. And there's one instrumental, but it's not spelled in the way that you traditionally spell instrumental, but a Google search would bring that up. It's an orange logo. It's a huge, massive database of every kind, like agriculture, childcare, education. That's another, but that one, they only give you a couple of free ones to kind of check out. And then there's a subscription. It costs, I think, around $200 a month. So there are, I think, 10 to 15 massive grant databases that I have found, but they all come with really massive price tags. The biggest price tag I've seen was $2,500 a month just to access the grants. So I decided to bypass that and to find my own way of finding grants, which has proven to be widely successful. So there are ways around it. You can Sherlock Holmes it, you can do Google searches, you can look in old books, honestly, old books. The older the foundation, the better the chances of success, of them funding you with money and them being legitimate and all the other things. So the news will tell you about grants. If you go to networking events and just tell people that you're looking for grants, and that if they know of any, just let you know. I've gotten so many that way. There are all kinds of weird ways to find them if you're going to look for them yourself. But if you don't want to do that, just get a subscription database or online with instrumental. I can offer that as well, but nothing I'm doing is nothing that you can't do on your own. You can totally do this, DIY it yourself. It's just going to take a lot of work.
Thank you. Thank you. And can you just give us a quick overview of, like, you mentioned books, what type of books?
So it's so funny. I actually have it right here. So the first time I found like a resource that kind of blew my mind was in this really old graphic designer and artist market, right? So this book is just telling you basically how to be a working graphic designer, right? And it's fairly thick, so there's like a bunch of stuff, but in the very back where these little two tabs are, it has this section of resources. So it lists a bunch, you can see the highlighting there, just a bunch of really old organizations that some of them have websites, some of them don't. And it's just like this one organization funds female graphic designers. If you're a female graphic designer, go to this website, check it out. They have a one time a year $1,000 grant and you can apply and get it. So I thought, okay, cool. But if you get, that's just one, this book is, there's 500 pages here. There are 50 pages theoretically in just this book of grant listings. So any kind of like do it yourself, self-help. There's grant writing for dummies that has listings of where you can find grants, anything to do with fundraising, money, webinars, YouTube, Instagram, like these places will, kind of drop an application here and there, just expecting that it'll be jumped upon because it's free money, but they don't really market it very well. So it's on you to find it. And that way, that's another way of kind of ensuring a win, because a lot of these grants aren't even applied for because they put the grant out. They give you maybe a month to apply, but they're assuming that you've seen the application and that you fit it. And then they wait for applications and then they don't get them. And the first person who applies gets it. I've seen that happen like 15 different times this month alone. So again, it's just about being prepared. Look for self-help books in your industry, and in the resources section, you will most likely find a few, at least a handful of listings that will take you directly to grants that specifically fit you and your business.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful. And now we have multiple questions dancing around the same concept, question, topic, is specifically the grant that you got to cover the Brand Strategy Bootcamp. People are asking, the first one was, when you say that you wrote it specifically to cover the bootcamp, what type of grant was it? So people are curious about what is that grant, if you're able and willing to disclose that you were able to get for this, for the bootcamp specifically. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, it was called the Ingham County Sunrise Grant. I live in Lansing, Michigan, and the state of Michigan was given a certain amount of money to re-stimulate the economy. That money was given to the funder who started a program to release this grant, and I was made aware of it through networking with business professionals in my city. It was $5,000. It was the largest grant I had applied to at the time. So I frankly wasn't planning on winning the grant. I was scared. I was just like, I wasn't a professional at the time, or I wasn't viewing myself as a professional. So I just thought, okay, I don't know why they'd say yes to me, but I can tell them why they should. And I was super unsure of myself. And lo and behold, I got it, and I got high marks on it. They thought the writing was, well crafted. The story made sense. The ask was clear, and I had the website and the portfolio and the social media to back up why what I was saying, like what I'm doing matches what I'm saying. So they said it was an easy yes, and that's where I was like, okay, cool. Maybe I'm not as bad at this. Like maybe it's not as hard as I thought it was going to be, or something, but again, I didn't really take it seriously. And then it wasn't until I got it. And when I did get it, I had a panic attack. I had never gotten who I'd never just been given $5,000 from anyone. So I didn't know what to do with myself. I was just like, oh my God. And then when I finally got the money into the bank, I stopped myself from entering the boot camp because I was afraid of how awesome it would be. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I was so like beaten down by all these obstacles of being a woman in business and not having funding and doing everything myself and not having help and all this crap that it wasn't going to work. And I was prepared for that, but it, you know, that was the beginning of my life changing, was getting that grant, going to the boot camp, and now being here to talk to all of you. So there are details about the grant that I'm not quite sure off the top of my head, but it was basically a federally funded grant filtered through a community that provided it through a community organization. So I'm not sure if it would be flagged a community grant or a federal grant, but it would be one of the two.
Got it. Thank you for that. And there was a question about someone asking, and I don't know if this would even be you'd able to do this, but they were asking, I know it would need to be modified, but maybe can I use it as a template to get started? So they said, are you willing to share the grant you used to pay for her course? So you just share that. I think what they might be asking, Frank, you can come on and ask a question, is like what you use to apply for the grant. Can you give us some pointers on like, what was it that you used, the information that you shared in the grant application that you believe might have contributed to you winning? And Frank, I'm totally rewording your question. So if I didn't hit on what you're asking, please raise your hand or put it in the chat. Kimberly, did that make sense though? But what do you think was in your application that maybe contributed, that might help the people here in moving forward and applying for application or applying for grants?
I would say when you're writing your grant applications, try to make the reader feel something, like try to make them feel like they've been on your journey with you the entire time. So you reach your first obstacle, tell them about how awful it feels. Like, what's it doing to you physically? What's it doing to your family? What's it doing to your psyche? What's it doing to your work? Is it affecting any of that stuff? Is it harming us? Tell me all about that. And then somehow, so you're still alive, you're here, awesome, you've clearly gotten past it, but how? How did you get over that obstacle to reach the next one and the next one? How many did you have to overcome to be here now asking me for money? Like, tell me that story, make me cry, maybe, you know, like I'm not suggesting write a horror anthology. I'm more, to be specific, I'm suggesting that you be human, like be authentic, be transparent. If you, like me, I was in a car accident as a teenager, and at the time I was playing the alto saxophone, and the news crews came and all these ambulances, and they focused on the wreckage, not on me. And I just felt like a big, like a pawn, which was ridiculous. But that story was part of what I put into my grant proposal. Like, I nearly died trying to make art and be creative. Nobody really seemed to care but me. And I kept going. And after every obstacle, another, you know, a different thing that sucked, and a different thing. After all that stuff, here I am, still here. I'm still positive. I still want to do this. I still want to help people, but I can only do that with your help. Can you please give me $5,000 so I could take Melinda Lipsey's boot camp? And that's what I said. And they were like, of course, duh, obviously. Like, right? You can take, I just took all the knives that were thrown at me and I turned my biggest weakness into my biggest strength. And I did that by writing all the time. I had a traumatic event as a 12-year-old person. I wrote my journal for years and years and years. I filled up 5 of them. And that has given me the ability to craft a story in a way that is moving and succinct and makes a point. And that's why I individually am able to win these grants. If you feel like you can craft a story in that way, absolutely pick up your pen, pick up your tablet, whatever, and start writing grants, because that is what you need. Along with all the other stuff, it's the ability to make somebody feel something that's what will win you this. That's what will give you a yes all the time for any application that you write.
Thank you for sharing that, Kimberly. I know you're getting some love in the chat too. And Brett had mentioned, so write the grant like a story. And I think you just answered that question. You're taking people on the journey with you of the hardships, the obstacles, what you're trying to do, what's getting in your way, and really bringing them to that. That's not just a list of facts and things you want, but you're a human. They're a human too. And you're talking to them and sharing the story and what you need, even though, we're dealing with money thing it's more transactional, but really, what is it actually fueling? What it's to them, I'm imagining, is it's fuel. It's fuel to help you do the thing that you're trying to do in the world. And then if it brings good, especially, and it helps you overcome some hardship, and then it helps others overcome hardships, I imagine that's what they're looking for. Does that hit that?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. All right. So those were the questions that I saw in the chat. If I missed anything, please put your question in the chat or raise your hand. We'll get to the raised hands first. Kimberly, while we're waiting for anyone else to bring in their last questions before we wrap this up, could you talk a little bit about what those who are here who maybe are not in the US, where could they start? And I understand your expertise does not lie there, but do you have any sort of suggestions that you might have for them in where they could even start looking for grants?
Yes, I'd say for those overseas, start within your city. So start with your citywide website, check their resources page, see if they have a specifically grant funding page, because most of them should have something like that, or something within their resources that would direct you to any really close physical proximity grant funding. And then from there should be people who can direct you to other things. So I know that pitch competitions are another way. Well, I've seen grants that have that as a component to them. So that might be a different way to get funding that isn't a grant, is through a pitch competition. Another one would be a request for proposal. So an organization might need a creative or a musician or something, and you do that thing, you could submit an application for that too. And it's not necessarily a grant per se, there's a different amount of work, but it's a different way to get funding. And then if you're ready, there's the last way for those overseas, I would suggest doing a simple Google search. So just being as specific as possible. So for me, I'd say musician wanting to restart playing, needs funding for new saxophone or something. And then Google will bring up, about all the keywords that tie to that. You can do this also on Instagram. Do grant funding, just search for hashtag grants on Instagram. And Instagram, for some reason, has the biggest collection of international grant funding I've ever seen. I have no idea why. The last way, check your local news. The local news will report on, new businesses, people who looking for volunteers, looking for people to give money to. So that would be another way. And again, the closer you can stay to your physical location, the better chances you have of getting money, and quicker. It might not be, it's not going to be in the millions, but it'll be significant enough, and you can kind of bank that all up into like one big massive win. And the smaller wins have less stipulation that will equal over time the amount, it could be in the millions, theoretically.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm going to assume that nobody has any. Okay, wait, we are getting questions. Like, we don't have any more questions. Okay, I'm going to answer these, or we're going to answer these last few questions. And while we do, I will be putting the links again in case you missed them for Kimberly. I will be putting them in the chat again. And while we answer these questions, if you guys can think of one takeaway, I know we shared earlier the takeaway, I want to share again, one takeaway of something new that you learned, or maybe something that you're going to go out and you're going to try after this call on and you getting a grant, getting funding. So if you could put that in the chat, it'd be awesome. I'd love to share those in the interwebs. Okay, the questions that we have are from Nicole. What are your recommendations for managing the workload after receiving multiple grants simultaneously? I love the optimism here of we are winning these grants and we're going to have so many that we have to manage the workload. So how would you suggest managing that after you've won multiple grants? You are on mute.
I would start with the simplest, easiest way to do this. If you have $1 billion budget now, or you have a $0 budget, or even a negative dollar budget, I would open a separate, either a separate Google account and a separate email address with a separate calendar, and list every single grant that you have applied for or you will apply for on a certain date. So I like to set mine up on my calendar for 5 days before the grant is actually due. So I freak out 5 days before. And if I'm like, oh, I can't do it, then I actually have 5 more days, and I trick myself out doing it that way. But I put on there the date that I have to apply by and the link, and then the date that they will let me know if I've won it or not. And then I just make sure to set up an alarm, and then wait for that. So I'm not constantly thinking like, oh, am I missing a grant? Am I missing something, application, whatever. And then attached to all of that, a Google Drive. So if you've applied for me, for Melinda, all I was doing was applying to be a student in her boot camp. So when I paid for the boot camp, I saved the receipt in my Google Drive with the paperwork for the grant and all of the follow-up information that they sent. And then now I can say, when they come back in 6 months and say, how was the boot camp? Did you have fun? I can just send them the file. So you're not thinking about it. It's not lost. Just make it part of your practice. Like if you're saving files, if you're a creative, if you're a graphic designer, you're saving a bunch of files, like just treat those processes that you have in place currently that work for you for other things, apply that process to this. So you can follow the process that I've shared with you, or you can just apply something that you know works for you to it. But either way, just make it a process and follow it. Plan to plan or plan to fail.
Awesome. And then the last one, Jason Tucker, I might need a clarification on your question, but he's asking, as someone in branding and filmmaking, are there any types of unexpected grants available that you wouldn't think existed?
Yes. Okay. So for filmmakers, I'm so glad somebody asked that, because I found the mother lode of grant applications specifically for filmmakers. I only know 2 currently, personally, who would be in need of that service. So I just kind of held on to it. As a professional in the grant writing world, I often come across really bizarre grants that are super awesome and have massive ticket amounts, but they're for very unicorn type people. I do save them regardless. And if somebody comes across, we cross paths and they need the opportunity, I'm totally happy to give it, because it literally only benefits them. So if I get to help, if I get to be the tiny spark that helps you, just like, here you go, yay. But if there are any filmmakers here, I have a separate database created just for you with over 58 open grant applications totaling over $500,000. And can do that for anyone else.
Amazing, amazing. And I just wanted to call out Frank's comment in the chat is brilliant. He said he thinks he's going to look for as many past expired grants that you could qualify for, and set up Google alerts for those websites. So that's brilliant. So set up Google alerts for keywords and websites. That's another, I like that little tip. That's great. Kimberly, are there any last things that are on your mind that you wish somebody would have asked, or that you want to share about this whole process? And I will share your links again in case you guys missed it. I'll share her links in the chat. But give us your final thoughts, Kimberly.
I want to say that when I started going to art school and learning about all the stuff as a creative, that all the ways people can help me and other people in my industry, this avenue was literally always posed as insanely hard, nearly zero success, plan to fail, don't waste your time. So I didn't. I would just do it from time to time when I just kind of felt like it. That was bad advice. Like, I love doing this. I love the work around it. I love piecing all the things together. It's fun. It's simple for me. I get to help people. I get to be Lady Robin Hood. It's awesome. So if you are having a feeling, if you're trying to start something like that yourself, and people are telling you you're crazy, or there's no way it's going to happen, or don't even try, don't. Like, if you're super passionate about it, totally do it. And now that you know that grant funding is available, there's no reason not to do it. Like, if you want to take Melinda's course, take Melinda's course. Like, obviously I'm biased about that because I took it and I loved it and all the things. So, but if you want to, I can help you do that. Like, if you want to, just help yourself get an intern or take a business trip or whatever it is, like, I want to help you. I want to help you do that. And so I'll be giving everybody a free workbook to help guide you along that journey to get you funded. And hopefully this will also be helpful to people overseas as well. But it would be awesome if you could tell me if anyone overseas uses it, if you could tell me what your experience is. And I will do my best as well to kind of look more into that, to kind of help everybody more, because I know that the laws and things overseas are super different. So the requirements might be different, but I want to make sure that you all are helped as well. So I hope. Thank you all for being here. I hope this was helpful, and I can't wait to read your comments and the things, and to see your businesses grow and thrive, and you just kill it out there. So
Thank you. Thank you. And if you guys have any further questions for Kimberly, I put the links in the chat. Go reach out to her. She said she's open in her DM. So go DM her, ask your questions there. And if any of you, thank you for the love for the boot camp, those of you in the chat. If you guys have questions about the boot camp, you want to join, you're thinking about joining, Kimberly and I, and anyone else who's in the boot camp that wants to stay, we'll stay on for 5 minutes and answer your questions. So thank you for joining us. Thanks for listening in if you're watching the recording. And Kimberly, thank you for offering all of your wisdom and knowledge and sharing all the things so openly, and as well as your story too. We appreciate that. So thank you. Thanks, Kimberly. And thanks everyone for joining. We'll stay on for a few minutes after to talk boot camp. Bye guys.